Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Vampyr or Vampyr, depending on how you want to pronounce that. I was actually going to do this video over some of my own gameplay, but unfortunately I couldn't get my recording software to work for the game. But that's fine. I just wanted to kind of talk about my impressions of it and what I thought about it so far. It's not something I ever intended to really play on the channel. It's just, not my style really, although it is a game I do enjoy. So this is like official pre-alpha trailer stuff from before the game's release. Anyways, as I just said, I am really enjoying the game so far. I sat down to play a little bit of it the other day, and I think I spent nearly the whole day, a lot longer than I intended to, actually playing it. And I've got to say, it's really good at what it tries to do. It's not exactly what I expected when I saw some of the pre-release stuff, but I am still enjoying it. It's just not, again, what I was kind of going into the game looking for. So, overall, I think a lot of people are enjoying the game. It's got very good reviews on Steam, just about everywhere, in fact. The reviews are pretty positive, but there are certain circles of the internet that aren't super keen on it and are bashing it for various things. And I think as long as you understand what this game was trying to do, it's pretty easy to see that they definitely achieve that. And as long as that's sort of what you're looking for, it's definitely a very well-made, enjoyable game. So this is not supposed to be like an action RPG or anything to that end. It's made by the same people that did Life is Strange, and if you're familiar with that franchise, then you should kind of know what you're getting yourself into here. The game is very dialogue heavy, and your choices do make quite a bit of an impact on your overall gameplay experience. That said, I guess I should mention now, or I probably should have mentioned earlier, there is going to be some spoilers in this video, not heavy ones. I'm not that far into the game, so I can't ruin the ending for you even if I tried. But there will be some minor, like, middle game spoilers. God, looking at this video, by the way, the facial features and everything, all of the characters have improved so much in the full version of the game from this pre-alpha stuff. Anyway, my first experience with these decisions mattering was when my character found himself in some stuff happens. You find yourself sort of working the cover of your character actually is a surgeon, and through some stuff that happens, finds himself sort of finding a cover as a surgeon for this hospital so that he can kind of moonlight as a vampire as well as a doctor. And as you approach this hospital, there's a character in a scuffle, and he wins the fight, and you kind of go over to him and see if he's all right. But because he is badly bleeding, your character kind of loses his control a little bit, and you can just kind of go with it, or you can tell the character, to let the guy go, and he will. But that character happens to be the leader of one of the prominent gangs in the early part of the game, and if you do him in and drink his blood and kill him, he's gone. And one person and her like kind of sidekick guy end up taking over the gang. And so if I had not done that, this gang actually would have been run by a completely different or a completely different person, and that person would have had a major impact on my game, whereas he's had pretty much none because he's the only person I did in. I actually felt really bad about it, but I was kind of curious, and it turns out he probably wasn't a very good guy anyway, so he might have had it coming. But anyways, he's so far the only person I've vampire killed like that, although obviously there are plenty of enemies, including human ones, you have to fight and kill, but they generally are the aggressors, so they kind of have it coming. In this case, I was definitely the aggressor. So there are a lot of situations like that, because virtually any character in the game can be done in, and their blood actually has a certain value of XP depending on how important a character they are. And every night when you go to sleep to sort of advance to the next day, there will be like newspaper stuff letting you know like what your deeds, like what kind of effect they had on the world. And so if you are constantly, sucking the blood of people and eliminating these characters from the game, you're going to hear about it, and you'll also feel the effects of it, at least to some degree. I can't personally attest to how large a degree, because I've tried to avoid that. I'm trying to be a fairly good vampire in that respect, but I've already felt it a little bit, and I've got to definitely give the game props for that. The other thing I'm really impressed with is the setting. If you're not familiar with the setting of this game, even if you've played it and you just don't know too much about the history and whatnot, this is set during 1918, so like right at the end of World War I, during the outbreak of the Spanish flu pandemic. And they actually get a lot of the history right for most of that stuff. The character himself is actually a veteran. He was a surgeon and a blood transfusion expert prior to the war. During the outbreak, he served as a field surgeon for the army, and then has come back. I'm not to the point where they reveal what happens to him that turns him into a vampire, so I don't know exactly what happens between his return, or him leaving the war front, and him becoming a vampire. So I don't know what those spoilers are. I'm not going to tell you, even if I did. But the setting is great. Everything feels like a ghost town. The Spanish flu is everywhere, and if you're not familiar with the Spanish flu, it's one of the worst pandemics in world history. It killed like up to 100 million people. It was affecting the United States, Europe. I don't know if it ever got to Asia. Maybe a little bit into the Middle East, possibly. But I don't know if it ever got into Asia. But essentially, it was like the first major outbreak of H1N1, and it killed a lot of people and was really aggressive. And one of the interesting things about it was that it was actually highly fatal to otherwise very healthy young adults, whereas generally the flu is only dangerous to like infants, children, and elderly people with compromised immune systems. But this one actually killed a lot of otherwise healthy adults. And part of that was because of all the overcrowding and stuff, very poor sanitation, things like that. But in the game, they're sort of using the Spanish flu as sort of a vector for this vampiric virus that's spreading. The vampire stuff works sort of as you'd expect. It plays to all the traditional vampire rules. But another thing that's happening is that it's sort of gotten into the flu, the Spanish flu itself, and so some people that are getting infected, at least in this part of England, it's set in like South London along the riverbank. But a lot of the people who are getting infected are also turning into what they call in the game skulls, that are basically these like sort of messed up feral sort of vampire creatures. They're not wholly vampire. They're completely mindless. They're feral, but they have some of the vampire abilities. They eat human flesh. I don't know that they necessarily suck blood. Generally, you just see them like gnawing on corpses until you beat the crap out of them. But the setting is fantastic, as you can see a little bit in this. It's constantly gloomy and foggy. You're talking about early 20th century London, following the industrial revolution, before people started worrying about the environment and whatnot. So it was always foggy. Now, there are a few complaints I have about the game. And I wouldn't say complaints, because it's not that they were trying to do this and failed. It's just things that I think would have added more to the game had they attempted it, and obviously succeeded. But the game's combat is definitely serviceable, and that's one of the biggest knocks to the game I've seen, is that the combat isn't very good. And I think the combat is fine for what this game is trying to do. The game is not supposed to be, again, an action RPG. But the combat works. It's not bad. It's not great. There is a little bit of rhythm and strategy to it. A lot of it's your character build. I've found that running fully melee with a main-handed weapon that does bleed damage and then an off-handed weapon that does stun is like by far the most effective build. Essentially, you have like three and I wish I could have, done some of my own gameplay to show you guys this, but you have 3 status bars, one for health, one for stamina, and one for blood. And all of your special vampire abilities drain blood. To some degree, they might drain stamina as well. But essentially, you always want to keep your blood up because that allows you to use your abilities. And some of your abilities can even heal yourself. So if you have blood, you can have more health, basically. So obviously, main hand weapon, if you're constantly bleeding the enemy, you can drain blood from that. And then the stun allows you to knock enemies down, which you can then pounce on them and bite them, and you can drain blood. And actually, if you build your character right, you can actually just heal directly from that. But I have found that that's a pretty effective combination. The stuns will let you interrupt the bigger, stronger characters that hit harder, and then flat out knock down the weaker characters. There's also some cool abilities. Not as many as I would have expected, though. They're a bit light on the level up tree. It's actually a little bit simpler than I would have expected. But some of the abilities can branch, which is cool. So as you level them up, you can actually decide to go, maybe I want more damage or better crowd control, and kind of diversify and specialize your abilities that way. One thing I would have really liked to have seen, though, in the combat system is some sort of stealth mechanic. I was actually very surprised that there wasn't one, because the game feels like it would really benefit from it. Unfortunately, you can't really sneak around. There's no way to really get up behind people and sort of incapacitate them without anyone else noticing. Once you go into a fight, you're aggroing the entire area, basically. So that's something I really think the game could have benefited from. Obviously, as a vampire, stealth and subterfuge is kind of a given, but in this game, that's not the case. And there actually are some abilities, like I think we saw earlier in the video, he kind of jumps to a ledge and just kind of like vaporizes and then reappears over there. There's really no reason why you couldn't do something like that to kind of, sneak around behind people. Maybe just even a stealth crouch and, come behind them, lay into their neck, and they're done. That would have been nice to see. Unfortunately, there's really nothing like that in the game. Another thing I think it would have really benefited from, and maybe this is a thing in the game and I just haven't encountered it yet, but a fast travel system seems like really missing. As far as I can tell, there isn't one. And it would have been fairly easy for them to implement because there are various like safe houses around the map. And so those would have been ideal places for you to, fast travel to and from. Because, again, you can sort of, like, vampire vaporize or turn it, whatever he's doing. I think it might be turning into bats or something. But you can kind of jump from a ledge to another ledge across open space. There's really no reason why they couldn't just apply that to, like, a fast travel and have him sort of, like, disappear and then reappear in the safe house. And even if that was like an ability that you had to unlock through XP, I would have been fine with that. But there's currently nothing like that in the game, at least to the point I've gotten to, which I think I'm like level 15 or something. And I'm at least like 8 hours into the game at this point. So like I've definitely been taking my time, talking to everybody I can, getting every little bit of information. So I'm not like speed running by any means, but I definitely feel like the game could have benefited from that, because there's a lot of backtracking involved. You're constantly going to these various different areas to check in on people, because essentially you're playing like Plague Doctor while you're playing Vampire, and your job is to keep these people healthy until you decide to do them in, or whatever it is you decide to do. But otherwise, again, I'm really enjoying the game and I'm pretty pleased with it. So if you guys haven't checked it out, I would recommend that you do. It's pretty enjoyable. So I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Those are just my thoughts on the game. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you guys back here for my next video.